All right. So today's presenter, Nathaniel Choi, pronouns he, they, is originally from Bolivia and is half Peruvian and half Korean. Nata identifies as biracial, bicultural, and bilingual, queer individual who holds his identities with pride and fortitude. Nata currently works at Latino Behavioral Health Services in Salt Lake City, Utah, as the Director of Peer Services. We are at the Georgia Council are partnering with Latino Behavioral Health as part of our plan to offer a bilingual Spanish-English CARES training in the future. Nata is also a person in long-term recovery, and his CARES cohort is 51. The best of all the CARES. This is our first, and he was at a really great CARES because it was the first one that was back in person after the pandemic. So it was great to be back in person over at the Door in Decatur, and it was a great weekend. All right, so today, question, persuade, and refer. Nata, thank you for being here. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All righty. Thank you, Alvin. Al. I'm like, I've never called you Alvin before. Once again, my name is Nata. I'm so happy to be
Nata,
here.
could I interrupt for just a second?
Yes.
Tara Jackson is the newest member of the CARES team. Tara, would you like to unmute and say something?
I would say hello to everyone. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and what that means for me, it's been over 9 years since I had a drink or a drug. I am a wife today, a grandmother today, and most of all, I'm present for myself and my family today. And thank y'all for letting me be a part of this webinar.
Yay, we're so happy to have you. Thank you, Tara. All right, Nata, thank you for letting me interrupt you. You can take a shot at it again.
Thank you, Tara, too, and welcome to the CARES team again. Like I said, my name is Nata. I am also a person in long-term recovery, and what that means to me, it's been over 15 years that I have been diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And as they said, I'm CARES 51. It was an amazing experience to go from Utah to Georgia and learn how the peer support system and movement is just taking over the whole US, the nation, honestly. We have our own support, our own peer support program and stuff like that, but Georgia is by far one of the greatest ones that we've seen, and we are, trying to model ourselves behind Georgia. So y'all have an amazing team and such great resources as well, and so I'm so happy to be here to give y'all this this training. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and like Al said, this is the where's the presentation? What are you guys seeing? Oh, the other one.
Yeah, well, this is where we are seeing where it shows the next slide on the right. There we go. That's good.
Okay, wonderful. I got it. All right. So as Al said, this presentation is called QPR, which is Question, Persuade, Refer, and it's specifically designed to help all of us, CARES and non-CARES, be able to address our loved ones and people that we are working with when it comes to having suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, or just any sort of intent. It helps us and prepares us for those specific situations. So I want to encourage everyone to let's have this conversation, let's have a dialogue. I love the participation of everyone, and we'll kind of wrap up at what would be what is it, 6:15? No,
6:15.
For questions and just to wrap up. All right. So first, we're going to talk about language. because as we're talking about suicide and suicidality, I want us to be very careful of how we are referring to people who have died by suicide or people that have tried to take their life. It's very important. Just the way that we refer to someone who is in recovery, we're not saying like, oh, this guy's an addict. We're using specific language, specific vocabulary to describe the people that we're working with and just anyone in the community. So we're trying to steer away from stigmatizing language and going into language that is much more understanding of what it is, what suicide is. So we're going to avoid saying things like completed suicide or successful suicide. The reason why is because we're not trying to say like this is a checkbox or they just completed something, like we complete a test or something. We want to destigmatize that and take that away, and by saying died by suicide. And that way we are just stating what just happened, which is that this person died by suicide, instead of saying they've completed something. Same thing on the other side, if they have they survived their attempt, we're not going to say unsuccessful or failed suicide. I think these are terms that are usually used in like the medical field and the psychological field. And as we know, like we're not clinicians, we're peers, and we have a different vocabulary that helps us to take away the stigma. And so we use phrases like they survived their attempt, focusing on like the kind of like the survival or like how they are still alive. A common thing that we hear a lot is, oh, this person committed suicide. And this kind of implies the fact that suicide is either a crime or a sin. Despite like our beliefs, and perhaps some of us may think that suicide is a sin, it is very stigmatizing, and it puts the blame on the person who has passed away. So once again, we say things such as died by suicide or they took their own life. So we're not implying that it's the crime or the sin. Now, Sally is suicidal. This goes into, for example, the person first language. Although this is person first, it is more about, we're trying to focus more on that Sally has these suicidal thoughts and is not suicidal, that they're not defined by suicide, but that they have these suicidal thoughts. And so if changing your language can help people to feel safer asking for help, then changing the language can save lives. So we're taking away the stigma, and we're allowing people to feel like they can talk about this without feeling the blame or the shame or just the like all the wonders of what it is to have suicidal thoughts.
So Nata, this is sort of like the first and purse language that we learned in the academy, right?
Exactly. And honestly, language matters a lot when it comes to anything that has to do with recovery, because there's the medical jargon that we hear all the time, and that really doesn't focus on the person. And today we're going to be focusing on the person. Any questions about this? All right, so today we're going to be talking about QPR. So just to preface to everyone, QPR is not a counseling service or a treatment. This is not like something that is like clinical. the purpose of QPR is to offer hope through positive action. So we will be going over how we can offer that hope and how we can act in positive action. So just to kind of preface, this is a difficult topic. For a lot of us, we may have personally had an experience with suicide, or we may know someone who has tried to take their own life, or who died by suicide. And so it's very important to take our time. If we feel like this is overwhelming, this content is overwhelming, you're more than welcome to just kind of step out for a second, take care of yourself first. And every time we talk about suicide, we do need to come with an understanding and a feeling of empathy of what we need to do and how we need to do it. And so this is important to really understand our beliefs about suicide. And then always focus on creating a sense of connectedness.
And so, Nata, I'll say that I'm available to stay around after the webinar if anyone would like to hang around and talk.
Yes. And so this is the purpose of QPR. QPR is addresses the high risk people, so people that are thinking, that do have the thoughts, that are showing the symptoms. QPR also offers the possibility of intervention, in early intervention. And so once again, QPR is not a treatment, but it is a way of offering treatment to someone. And we'll talk about that when we talk about refer. And when we talk about the gatekeeper is us, the people who are giving or are giving that hope. The QPR program is based in Utah, and I didn't make this slide. I don't like the word gatekeeper, but this is kind of what they use as the verbiage. All right, so let's go on a little number kind of situation of how much suicide is a problem in our state. And in Georgia specifically, like Georgia has the lowest rate in the South, but higher than the national rate in the US. In 2022 or 2021, 1,659 lives were lost due to suicide. And fortunately, there were no record of suicide deaths in children over the ages, in the ages of 0 to 7. In just Georgia, in the state of Georgia, there have been at least 9,897 medically treated attempts in 2021. And so these, I want to kind of make a distinction of the people that were lost and the people who tried to take their life. As you can see, these two numbers are very different and very large in size. But this is how big our problem is. And suicide is something that can be prevented if we can see the signs, and we know what to do. If we go on to just statistics, in 2021, we saw that, for example, after the pandemic, the suicide rates increased. I'm not sure about the 2022 or 23 statistics, but I am guessing that they're probably around the same area or perhaps a little lower. But at the same time, because of COVID, a lot of people have suffered a lot of mental illnesses and substance use disorders. And so because of that, there have been more suicide deaths and along with that, suicide attempts. Then when it comes to the national average, this is how much of a problem it is in our nation. And I live in Utah, and I'm currently residing in Utah, and we have a higher rate of suicide than Georgia. And so for us, it is a big problem, and especially within the younger and LGBTQ population. And so there has been a great deal of work that needs to be done in all states to decrease the number of death rates when it comes to suicide. Now, I want to ask someone, is there someone that can read this quote for me, please?
Yes, I'm Bernice. I'm in long-term recovery. And what that means for me, I have not found a necessary use in over 26 years and 5 months.
Wonderful.
All right. The culinary, more positive statistic, the one that is not articulated often enough, is that among all those millions who actively consider suicide, less than 1 in every 10 make an attempt on their own lives. And of those, only a minority even go on to die by suicide. This means that in every community in the country, in every part of the world, we are living among people who have faced the worst of personal pain and doubt and have come through them to better lives. Why is there so little in the public sphere about their trials, triumphs, and truths? And what might they say if they did not need to fear judgment, scrutiny, and stigma?
Thank you, Brittany. I really appreciate this quote because it tells us how much more we discuss and talk about the good things and our triumphs and everything, but we don't talk about what's really happening, what's really hurting us. And when it comes to suicide, we don't talk about suicide. It is something that is, considered dark in our society. We don't really speak about it. We don't, go into parties saying anything, because there's a lot of judgment and stigma behind it. And of course, sadness. Some people don't know what to do, don't know how to talk about it. And that's what creates more of the isolation, more of the pain and the doubt. Like this slide says, most people do not go on to die by suicide. We are living among people who have faced the worst of personal pain and doubt and will come through them to live better lives. And so as people and persons in recovery, I know that we have gone through a lot. We have faced sometimes death, and it has come to our doorstep, but we have come through. We are now carers. Most of us are carers. And in that part, it means that there is hope, that no matter how dark and deep we go, we can always come out. And that applies the same with suicide. So let's talk about a little bit of suicide myths and facts. And so I'll show you guys like a little statement, and y'all tell me if this is a myth or a fact. All right. First one is, asking a person about suicide will make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. Is this a myth or a fact?
Myth.
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 Okay, we're seeing a lot of myths here.
Myth.
It's a myth.
Myth.
Yep.
Myth.
Asking someone directly about intent lowers anxiety, opens communication, and lowers the risk of suicide attempt. So this means that if we're going to talk about it, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to put it out in the open, and we're just going to spill all the beans, because when we're in pain, when we're suffering, the only thing we need is for someone to talk to us, to be a listening shoulder, to see us for who we are and not what we're going through.
Right.
What CARES has taught me is that the opposite of addiction is, what is it? Community. I say community, but there's, what is it?
Connection.
Connection.
Connection. I say community, and it doesn't rhyme well. So, but it is community connection. It's about that person who holds your hand, who can really see you. And when we're asking someone about suicide, we're allowing that connection to happen. All right, myth or fact. No one can stop a suicide. It is inevitable, especially once a person decides to take their own life. There's nothing anyone can do to stop them.
Myth.
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 I'm loving these answers. If people in a crisis get the help they need, they may never consider suicide again. If they are better prepared to ask for our help. Suicide is one of the most preventable kind of deaths, and almost any positive action may save a life. Now I can let everyone know that as a person in recovery and a person who has had many days and nights thinking about suicide, what saved me and what helped me was my community. It was connection. It was knowing that I wasn't alone. And as much as I was thinking about it, I did not do it. And because of that, I owe it to my community. All right, myth or fact, most people considering suicide communicate their intent sometime during the week preceding their attempt.
Myth.
I think that could be a fact.
Myth.
It could be a fact, but it's also a myth.
Yeah.
It's either or, because sometimes it just happens, even though they're thinking about it. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Melissa. I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means is I haven't had a drug, drink, or anything to alter how I think I feel in 19 plus years. So I would like to say that it can be either or, a myth or a fact, because sometimes they're telling you because they're seeking help, and so it can happen in a moment, it can happen in a week, or it can be a thought, and they're just wanting help to stop it because they really don't want to do it. Am I correct?
So let's talk about it. And thank you, Melissa, for your comment. It's actually a fact. People consider, the myth is that people considering suicide keep their plans to themselves. Now let's talk about this. When we're talking about communicate, it doesn't necessarily have to be verbal. Mm-hmm. It can, for example, a lot of people who are considering taking their life and they have a plan, an intent, they have like a date, they have all this kind of preparation. Perhaps they start, giving their things away. Like, for example, some people give away their Xbox or their PlayStation or their car, just because they might be nice, but really like they're preparing, and this is how they communicate. Perhaps some people are just plainly say like, I want to die, like I can't do this anymore. And that is also how they communicate. And some people do just give us like these nonverbal cues of, like, for example, just having this low motivation or having some sudden like energy to spend time with family that they've never really done before. And so the word communicate can be many things. And it's important that we understand the signs of suicide, especially when it comes to this. Okay, and we'll go into more detail about this in later slides. All right. People who talk about suicide may try or even complete an act of self-harm.
Fact.
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 Okay. So it is a fact. There are a lot of people, and this is kind of a key word is may try an act of self-harm. Not everyone does, but it is very common. All right. Any questions from here on?
Yes, I'm Bernice, and I'm in long-term recovery. I have a client that has started coming back to outpatient services, and I didn't see her for a week. And so her cousin came in and talked to me and told me that she caused self-harm to herself by cutting herself. So she tried to commit suicide. But she was silent about it. She kept coming, and she was letting everybody think that she was all right, but she was suffering in silence. So she took it upon herself to self-harm herself.
And what's your question, Bernice? How?
My question is that she had this facade up.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get through to someone that has a facade up and says that they're okay when they're not really okay? Because I didn't know she was going to do that to herself.
Now, Bernice, I think that is kind of a common experience, and at the same time, it's a very complicated case. The thing about it is, at least for you, Bernice, you probably see her maybe once a week or maybe twice a week. And in that hour or so, there's a little that you can see. And perhaps the signs were more noticing, were more noticed at home with her friends or her family. And that is where it's important to, for all of us to understand what the signs are so we can pay attention to them. Now, when it comes to the self-harm, the self-harm for me as a peer support would be something that I would be watching too. And I would be kind of checking in with her and being like, okay, like how are we doing with that? And how can we develop better coping skills? And at least in my experience and in my recovery, the reason why I self-harmed was because the pain that I suffered emotionally was so deep and so hard that the only way to forget about it was to feel pain physically.
Okay.
And so
Thank you.
Bernice, and it's just understanding where they're at. And I work a lot with kids, and I would also inform the parents what these signs are. So, yeah. Thank you, Bernice, for that question.
All right.
I have a question. Sorry.
Yes,
so when you were talking, when it was the idea that people communicate, maybe within the week that they plan a suicide attempt, might be more subtle, like you said, giving things away or other acts. I remember it was over 20 years ago when my cousin was in middle school. I obviously wasn't around, I'd gone to college, but she swallowed a bunch of pills in an attempt and was found laying unconscious and rushed to the hospital before she could pass away. My aunt and uncle found her just laying around. Now, I wasn't there, obviously, to witness her and maybe see behaviors leading up to it, but according to my aunt and uncle, they act like they were completely surprised, as if it came out of left field. I knew that she had mental health problems and, you know, suffered from depression. So I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to put two and two together because I wasn't there. But according to my family, there was nothing that like led them to even see it coming. You know, so that was an interesting thing to me when it was fact versus myth. Maybe there could have been more subtle signs, I don't know, than say trying to give things away.
So Lee, thank you for sharing that experience about your family. And this can get really tricky, you know, because we want to say like there wasn't any signs, but perhaps we didn't know what the signs were.
Right. Okay.
And because of that, we thought like, oh, it's just, you know, teenager hormones, you know,
right.
When really it could have been something else, but because nobody takes this training, you know, or nobody, honestly, you know, nobody cares about suicide until it happens in their own life.
Right.
Or things like that. And we don't seek out these trainings because we think that it's never going to happen to us. Right. And we hope that it doesn't happen to us.
Yeah.
Big part is learning what those signs are.
I'm wondering, like, because like again, this was all narrated to me from my aunt and uncle, who
right.
You know, I wasn't there to see, who seemed to be completely shocked that it happened. Maybe sometimes could people have a sense of denial if they notice even subtle signs?
Maybe.
Yeah.
And honestly, when it comes to the grief part of losing a child, sometimes it's hard to there's a lot of blame, I could say.
Well, I mean, she came through, she pulled through, they got her to the hospital right. as well, you know, but right. And she is still alive today.
Good.
You know, but it was just like, I guess I was wondering maybe there could have been a denial element, because that was a fact that you pulled up that then sort of triggered this memory, trying to figure out like, could we have seen this coming? Because according to them, it was almost like you said, like some teenage hormonal act.
Right. It's always maybe the end. That's the thing. That's why it's so important to take these trainings so we know.
Right.
Have that information.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I just want to kind of take the considerations of a situation where a person would start thinking and or take their own life or try to take their own life. There are protective and risk factors to this. The protective factors are the things that really could help this person to either survive or to not even try at all. And like we said, connectedness, having a good behavioral health or mental health care, just having supportive and attentive caregivers, and having problem-solving skills. Now, I know for a fact that a lot of us are not raised knowing how to regulate our emotions, or even talk about emotions, or talk about, you know, sadness. A lot of us were taught not to cry, not to express emotions, not to be angry, and those skills are so necessary in order for us to be able to emotionally regulate and also find a better option that doesn't include taking our own life. Now, there are also some risk factors. For example, if a person has tried to die by suicide before, then they have a higher risk of doing it again. They also have a mood disorder, any sort of history with substance use, and access to lethal means. That also increases risk factors. And so it is very important that we find and see the warning signs. And once again, we take all the signs seriously. And we never think, oh, if I ask them about suicide, like I'm going to increase their chances of suicide. Because as we've learned, that's a myth. So we're going to talk about 4 ways that warning signs can be displayed. Communication, verbally and non-verbally, because or due to life events, noticing kind of like the mood and their behavior. So when it comes to talk, they are usually, sorry, I was trying to look at it. The communication is about ending their lives, being a burden on others, feeling trapped, unbearable pain. And when it comes to like the direct verbal cues, I've decided to kill myself. I wish I were dead. I'm going to end it. If I don't get this promotion, like I'm going to kill myself. So some people can be very verbal and say this. And unfortunately, we are in a culture where people, especially kids, are like, oh, I'm just going to off myself, or I want to kill myself, things like that. And when I ever hear that, I don't take it as a joke. I always follow up. So they can be like, hey, like, are you okay? Like, you know, even if we know that they're okay, like maybe they're joking, but maybe they're also, this is the way that they express and say that they're considering suicide. Then there's the indirect verbal cues. That's like, you know, I'm tired of going on. Who cares? I just want out. I don't want to be around anymore. Like pretty soon you won't have to worry about. Now this is also a way that people communicate that they're thinking about it. And it's important to follow up on those clues. Questions about those two? Now, behavioral signs. I think those are it. Okay. We have to consider their history. So if they've had any, if they have any history with suicide, then that's important to consider. If they're just buying a bunch of guns for any kind of reason, or maybe they're just buying a gun, maybe just something to ask. If they have any sort of mental illness history, or for example, like they are a person, and let's say like they're a person that, like, for example, never finishes a project. But then one day you find out that they finished like 3 projects and that they're like wrapping everything up. And that's behaviorally how we can note things. There's the sudden interest or disinterest in religion, perhaps even increased use of substance uses, and unexplained anger, aggression, irritability. There's also situational signs. And these are like something happened in their life that could cause them to think about suicide. So being fired, an unwanted move, loss of a relationship, the pain of losing someone, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, child, best friend, that is big. Diagnoses, any sudden unexpected loss of freedom, and that, like for kids, that's a big one. Anticipated loss of financial security, like that is also a big one. Loss of therapist, counselor, teacher, mentor, peer support, or just fear of becoming a burden to others. Those can also be situational signs. So as I'm talking about this, y'all can see like when there's a sudden change in either their mood or behavior or impulsivity, or you know that this person is always like this, and then they suddenly change and they're this other way, and you're like, what's up? Like what's going on here? And maybe they've just like become a better person, and they've changed in so many ways. But as we all know, we didn't get to the place we are in our recovery from night to day. It's not a light switch. It's a sunrise that slowly comes up after a lot of hard work and dedication. But what we're looking for is significant change in mood, behaviors, in the way they talk or act. That's where we're like, all right, something's up, because you're usually not like this. And perhaps after a conversation, they're like, oh, wow, okay. You notice like, okay, this person is, getting better and they're doing great things. And like, all right, cool. But sometimes if we get into this conversation with our loved one, we start figuring out like, okay, you're getting ready for something. What are you getting ready for? And that could show us a lot. Questions about the signs?
Yeah, I am wondering, these things can also happen if people don't have suicidal ideation. So I'm wondering, it doesn't hurt to bring up with someone who's not contemplating suicide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of like the point, right? It's better to be safe, to be like, hey, what's going on? Like, are you, like, for example, I could see my best friend, like, and he not doing well, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And then maybe it's just because his dog died, or maybe it's because his mom died. But the thing is like, we need to notice these changes, and perhaps Al, it could be any other reason, but the point is like, we need to notice these changes and notice these behaviors and be like, hey, what's going on? How are you? What are you doing? And then if the point comes where we're kind of feeling like they're thinking about suicide, then we have to ask the question.
Better to ask the question when it's not needed than not ask it when it is.
Exactly.
So my name's Debbie. I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means to me is that I want to live. I had no hope. I wake up every morning wanting to live with hope, looking at my strengths. I have had multiple attempts in my past before recovery. So one thing that's part of my recovery is that, and by the way, I'm about to celebrate 28 years.
Wonderful.
So thank you. So the important thing is, part of my recovery in my support group is sharing some of this information so they know. So some of those things, I might say I suffer from a serious physical condition with a lot of pain, a lot of changes and loss. And I'd like to believe every day I'm in great shape and really positive, but I had some days. And so the people who know me, I share. And I don't mind if they ask me and they do QPR, because it's just the safe way to do. I'm a high risk person. This is a long time ago, but I recognize. So part of my recovery is to develop that sharing of what communication I might do.
I appreciate you so much, Debbie, because it's important to hear the other side. You know, like we're learning here from like what would you do to support someone else? But Debbie, we're hearing like how it can be supportive to you. Of if someone's like, hey, are you okay? Like, are you thinking about suicide? And you're like, no, I just have a lot of pain right now. And it's just my body. But thank you for checking in.
It's the last attempt when I came to in the ER, there were two people. They had lived experience. I don't remember their name. It was way before any of our programs. What I do remember is they gave me my first little pebble of hope. And that's what I needed. And then to keep building. It's a slower process. And it's something when that's happened numerous times from within me that I want to be aware of it. So that's part of what, you know, when I talk about my recovery, I don't have a need to use alcohol or an illegal drug. I do have a need to wake up and want to live. And that's what I pull my supports in to do. You can encourage somebody who's close to you or whatever to try to talk about those things as well.
Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate you sharing. Any more questions or comments about this?
I'm asking because it brought up another suicide that I actually knew about, where the person did die from suicide, and the part about impulsivity came up. He happened to always be impulsive. I think he was known to be impulsive with his spending, but prior to it, he apparently went out and bought a lot of materialistic things, but he also went out and did a lot of cosmetic surgery right before he killed himself. And to me, I guess it was shocking because I was like, well, you know, why would he go out and get all this cosmetic surgery if he was maybe planning a suicide? But there was a shift from his impulsivity to more extreme impulsivity prior to it. It was just that the cosmetic surgery thing didn't make sense to me, but maybe that could have actually been a sign.
Yeah. And that's where like the QPR training is specifically for, you know, like just normal, regular people, not cares. But we think about like our loved ones, we know them very well. So if they're just impulsive people, like great, but then when they start changing, we're like, okay, like what's going on now? And that's where we have to kind of just intervene, ask the question, because sometimes that's what they're needing. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we got 15 minutes, so we're gonna fly through this. But QPR is quite simple. The first Q is to question. And so it's important that we first know, like, if we are in doubt, like Al kind of mentioned, don't wait, just ask the question. If the person is reluctant, just be persistent. Just be like, hey, yes or no. Allow the person to talk freely and give yourself plenty of time. And I want everyone to know this. If you cannot ask the question, don't do it. Find someone that can, because asking these questions can be very hard. And the question can be very either direct or less direct. So it could be like, hey, have you been unhappy lately? Do you ever wish you could go to sleep and never wake up? You know, these kind of indirect questions that perhaps could start a conversation on suicide. And then there's the direct approach, just straight up saying like, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself? Or I have noticed that you're being this way. Like, I wonder if you're thinking about suicide. Once again, we've learned it is a myth that talking about suicide increases the chances of suicide. And so what we need to do is talk about it, ask people, ask them. And as this slide says, if you cannot ask the question, find someone that does. Now, I know how difficult it can be for us to go up to our loved one and have this conversation with them. It's really difficult. In our work setting as CARES, we can ask that question, and most of our organizations have a procedure. Some of us do a safety plan. Some of us refer them to the therapist that's literally next door. But when it comes to a loved one, this is a very hard question to ask. Definitely how not to. You're not thinking about killing yourself, are you? Or you wouldn't do anything stupid, would you? We're not being direct. We're not being less direct. We're just not helping the situation. And we don't want to be invalidating either. I prefer, my method is just a more direct approach because that is more to the point. Now, persuade. Once we ask the question, we go into the persuasion kind of side. And what we're persuading is we're persuading this person to receive help. So what we do when we're talking and we ask the question and they say yes, then we listen. We give them our full attention. We don't rush to judgment, and we offer hope. Then once they're done talking about everything that's been going on and what's been causing them to have these thoughts and wanting to take their own life, we ask, will you go with me to get help? Or will you let me help you get help? It is important that we are willing to listen and to help so that we can rekindle that hope. Because that makes all the difference. Being able to offer them that support, that listening ear, and then helping them to find help. And so that's where the R comes to. Refer. So a lot of people who are thinking about suicide, they feel like this is the end. This is the only solution. And maybe, for example, they've lost their house, they've lost their families, they've lost everything. And they feel like they cannot be helped. But what we're there to do is to bring that hope, that they can be helped, that they can find support. And we can be that support. And so the best referral, or the best way to do the R in refer, is in taking the person directly to someone who can help. And so this means, for example, calling a hotline together or a warm line together. Calling or going to, for example, a therapist, or calling their therapist, or calling a mental health professional, or connecting with them with the warm line, the Georgia Cares warm line. So all of this is like the best way. That's like number one. If they don't want that direct help, then the next best referral is getting them a commitment from them to accept help. So be like, hey, can we do this? I know you don't want to do this today, but do you want to do this tomorrow? And then having them say yes, I'll do it tomorrow. And making the arrangements to get the help. So you make the appointment, or you have the peer, the warm line or the crisis line ready for them to call. And then the third best help is to give them the information, all of the referrals, all the numbers, and in good faith that they can call and get the help that they need. Any willingness to accept help at some time or at some point, even in the future, is a good outcome. And I know there's a lot of fear behind that of whether they will or they will not. But remember, if we offer them hope, if we offer them that listening ear and that support, then they will understand that suicide is not the only answer. And so, just so everyone knows, there in Georgia, there is the Georgia Call Line, which is a crisis line. And there's also an app, the MyGCal app. And you can download if you have an Android, because it's not an Apple. There's the suicide prevention line. There's the Trevor Project Lifeline for LGBTQ plus people. And also we have the Georgia Cares line that I forgot to put in, Al. Let me see.
The Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network.
Yes.
Does anybody know anything about what help the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network has? Do they have a helpline? I think they have a warm line, don't they?
Yes, I'm Bernice. We have they have put up a new line, 988. You can call 988.
Okay.
And
so
does that takes you to the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network's line if they need it?
I believe so.
Okay.
So 988 is a national mental health crisis line, but they do connect you to your local kind of authorities and people who can help you locally. And obviously, like when you call 988, just like you call 911, it's an operator that is locally. So like in Georgia. There are also different organizations such as NAMI and AFSP, both of which who have warm lines and hotlines to call. But the easiest one is just calling 988. It's like 911.
Also, CARES warm line, also, they are available from 11 in the morning to 11 at night, CARES warm line.
Exactly. So there's the CARES warm line as well. And so, as y'all know, to be able to do the refer part, we need to know where and what. And let's say you don't have your phone nearby, so you can't use the app or look something up real quick, then at least you know the number 988. Which is the National Mental Health Crisis Line, equivalent to the 911, but it's not like a medical emergency, it's a mental emergency. And so that is a great resource and something that is something that we should all really know so that we can call in case there's emergency. Okay. So we don't really have time for role play, but let's end with this. Remember, when you apply QPR, you plant the seeds of hope. And so when you sit down with someone with care and concern, you ask them the question, they say yes. When you listen to them with all purpose, when you hear them out, when you don't judge, when you offer hope, when you give them another, glimpse of understanding their worth or understanding their purpose here in life, they, everything can change. Everything really can change. As we know, the opposite of addiction is connection. And just being that connection can make and save lives.
If you're working with an individual and you're working on a safety plan, put these resources into everybody's safety plan. Everybody needs them. Help them to put it where they can see it. If you're with an agency, I encourage like little cards for the wallet, magnets. If you're doing peer groups, great topic for a peer group to talk about this for everyone. It's not singling anybody out, it's sharing, and everyone will hear it, whether they might need it immediately or not.
Exactly. I appreciate you, Debbie, sharing that, because honestly, we all need to know these resources for ourselves, for our peers, for organizations. And in a lot of places that we work in, there's a procedure on how to help and support people who are thinking about suicide. And I completely recommend and push the procedure that your agencies go through. And at the same time, like, this information can be very useful for your own life and in your own kind of home and personal life. And at the same time, if you're working with family members, this is a good way of letting them know the warning signs and helping them understand like what to watch for in case they are worried that something is happening. But yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Nate.
Thank you, Nate.
Oh, very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing so many personal things too.
Is it right here like that?
Someone was saying something that got cut off.
I think it was just someone's background.
Yeah. So I apologize. The power flickered here and my internet went off. So I disappeared there for about 5 minutes. I'm glad you kept going on. That's the reason to make co-hosts in Zoom. So who has questions or experiences that they have had at work or in their life that they would like to bring up?
Well, I just want to say I'm Bernice and I'm in long-term recovery. I am KRS 40. So I just want to say that in my organization, we take a QPR every year. So we have that curriculum in our Reliance Learning. So, and it doesn't hurt to get a refresher course on that, every so often, from the Georgia Council. So I really appreciate you being the presenter and sharing the QPR with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bernice.
Nata, did you say that that's that training comes out of Utah?
You know what? I'm not sure anymore. I thought it was just a Utah thing, but if Bernice says that it's a national thing, then it's a national thing. Honestly, I'm kind of confused. But regardless of it, I'm glad that that Georgia has it too, because I think it's been very useful for us and our community, mainly because suicide is not something we talk about or we say anything, and this really gives the tools for people to address it in their lives.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. And, I worked as a chaplain at a hospital in Birmingham before I came to work at the Georgia Council. A chaplain for 1 year and then a peer support specialist at that hospital for 3 years. And that's where you have the obligation or the duty to report. you know, they told us how to handle it. They said the questions were, are you considering suicide, and do you have a plan? At that point, we had to let somebody know. And I actually ended up taking a call one evening from someone who was supposed to be getting help from the Veterans Administration in Birmingham and wasn't. And I was on the phone with him for about 20 minutes and continued to take calls from him on an ongoing basis for about the next 3 months. And it was really hard for me to figure out how to disengage because as a peer, I was the only person who was listening to him. So it's really, I'm really glad to see that we are getting more resources. 988 is so important. I'm really glad that they launched that. And, but yeah, I was in the hot seat one Saturday night about 9 o'clock. It was really interesting to be on that side of things.
Thanks, Al. Any other questions or comments?
I appreciate the presentation, Nato. Thank you very much. My name is JJ Jacqueline Myers. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I've had some personal experience with this. My daughter has actually had an attempt. And so I've lived through some of this, and I have used the 988 hotline. Was great. They were fantastic. And a lot of the things you talked about, like the impulsivity, the agitation, the substance use, all those things were factors. Her behavior changed very quickly. And we were able to get her the help that she needed. And she's in a much better place. She's stable now, medication adjusted and all that. So I appreciate everything that you shared, because all the things that you touched on and talked about were exactly the things that I have been through with her. This, of course, was very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm glad your daughter's doing well.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to make an executive decision that the weather is so bad here in Georgia that if we want to end early, we can. Because I was afraid I wasn't going to get back, or that y'all might not be here when I got back. So I'm glad everything worked out all right with that. But does anybody else have any further questions?
Well, it was a pleasure having you all here, and I'm so very happy to be here with y'all. I miss Georgia with all my heart. I hope that I can come again. And yeah, if y'all have any questions or want to get in contact, I also offer this training in Spanish. If y'all have any organizations or people or friends or family members, whatever, that are doing it or need.
Nata, would you like to put your email in the chat box?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Hello, Nate. Do you have any Facebook page for the Spanish training, something like that?
Yeah, Joanna, let me send you the link of our Facebook, okay?
Okay, gracias.
De nada.
You have got, yeah, she wanted done. What my part is. No, I told you I was gonna help her out.
Hey, Melissa, are you asking a question?
No, I lost.
I know Zoom can just randomly unmute us sometimes, it seems like. It drives me crazy sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, Joanna, that's our Facebook.
Okay, gracias, querido.
De nada.
I just want to throw some love back at Latino Behavioral Health. You were so wonderful in what you said about us. We've really enjoyed working with y'all too. We've had 6 or 7 of y'all come over to do trainings over here, and it's been a pleasure and really wonderful to make that connection. Glad to see that we're going to keep working.
Me too. All righty.
All right, guys, you are going to get 1.5 hours for CEU for attending this class. You will get, like I said, a certificate within the next week. I try to get them out on Friday, but tomorrow may be a busy day. But it will show up within the week by next Friday. And you can search your email for the name Alvin. That's the person who will be sending them out. So make sure you hang on to your CEUs, your certificates, so you can submit them at the end of the year. And you know, I assume you have heard about the Connect, that we've scheduled 2 of the Connects. One will be virtual on July 28th. It may be the only virtual one that we're doing. And then one will be in person in Dunwoody at the North Atlanta Church of Christ. And that's on August 11th. So make sure you sign up for a Connect. It's one of the things you have to do to remain current. And with that, thank you, Nata. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe if the storms are headed in your direction. Thank you. I'm going to let people log out. We can debrief just a bit. I'm going to stop the recording.